I did not see your slides uploaded on the CTD page, at least not in the last.
Sorry, indeed, I didn't do it yet. Can you see them now?
I can see your screen. Yes, I can see your slides. So please just make sure you upload them afterwards.
Sure, yeah, sorry about this. So my name is Laurent Bazara. I work actually at the computing science department at the LRI, but in collaboration with David Rousseau, Ishik Ghosh, and Biswajit in NGC Lab now, XLAL. And today we'll talk about optical processing units. So in as much as you have CPUs, GPUs, you also have OPUs. There will be three parts to my talk. First, I will spend a few slides explaining what it is, because it's not straightforward. Then I will try to apply it to HPP problems, first for tracking, because that's why we're here today, and then to calorimetry. So the example of supervised machine learning, textbook example, you have some features and data, you have a ground truth, you have your favorite supervised machine learning algorithm, and then you want to achieve some signal background separation. This is the nice plot where you can happily separate linearly. In practice, it's almost never the case. So you have to resort to other techniques. For instance, here the classical one, when you have two rings, you cannot separate them linearly, but if you go into higher dimension, for instance, if you multiply by the radius, then it becomes linearly separable. But you have to compute a kernel, a distance between the points to do this, and well, it takes a lot of computing. Something nice that was found is called the kernel trick, where you don't have to compute the whole distance in high dimension, but you can reduce it simply. So the classical celebrated support vector machines are exactly using this. It's kernel trick plus maximal marginal separation. It's nice, but you still have to compute a kernel in n samples time n samples dimension, which is huge. And in the last 20 years, there was this nice thing that was found. It's called kitchen things. I pointed a link to the original paper and the popularization by the authors. A general idea, as is written in the abstract, is to map the input data into a randomized low-dimensional feature space and then apply existing fast linear methods. So you will now have a matrix, which is, instead of being n samples times n samples, is in this reduced dimension d times d, and you can apply your favorite algorithm faster. To the point that now the bottleneck is to compute the data in this new dimension, which takes time. And the question would be, could there be a way to compute fast those matrices? And that's the whole point of the OPU. And you can see on top that it's really a physical device with lasers and stuff. And it works like this. You start with a Boolean vectors of 1 and zeros that we input to a DMD. DMD is digital micro mirror device. You have an array of 1 million mirrors that can point left to right. If they point left, they reflect a laser, and if they point right, they reflect it in the wall. And now you have this signal that goes through a diffusive medium, and it's really a glass with some white paint, and it will diffuse your input vector. Now, what's interesting is that what it does is equivalent to random matrix multiplication. So you have 1 million bits times 1 million bits, and you have some 10 to the 20 pixels that you can compute at the rate of 2 kilohertz, which means you make in the order of 10 to the 15 operations per second at the cost of a few watts. What's quite surprising at first is that if you have two nearby pixels, they won't be more correlated in the end than if they were at the opposite of the DMD. So really, every pixels are independent, and you have a camera at the end, and you get this spherical figure, which corresponds to random features that are IID. And it's really doing physically this random matrix multiplication, and you can sample in practice 10,000 to 100,000 of those random features, and apply your favorite linear algorithm. So if we put it into a workflow, now it comes like this. You have a physical problem on the left. You find some smart way to linearize your data. Then you pass it through the UPU. And that's the moment when the machine learning part starts. You have your ground truth, the Y vector. You have your random features, and then you can apply your favorite linear algorithm. Once again, in practice, most of the time we use some ridge regression, but yeah, that's the general idea. So can we use this idea to work on physical problems, HEP problems? I will first start with tracking part. So I worked a little bit on TrackML challenge. It was mentioned earlier by Moritz. Just to remind you some numbers, it was supposed to work in a HLHC conditions, so with a pileup of 50 to 200. It's a simulation where you have 10,000 particles per collision. They deposit in the tracker 100,000 3D points, more or less. That corresponds to 3 to 20 hits per particle. And one of the thoughts that went through the challenge was to find some innovative data analysis solutions. The question was, can we somehow use the UPU to work on this problem? Now, how to proceed? It's quite hard. There is a way using UPU to do some track following, but in this case, there is no simple geometry of successive layers that we could follow. Then maybe we can find a smart way to put the points in the UPU. But remember that you have 100,000 points, and more or less it's quite variable. You have 1 million hits, so it's quite not easy. We tried to research something that was fixed, which is the number of electronic channels. But once again, you have 2 billion of them. To put in 1 million OPU bits, it's really not easy. We tried several things. We tried hashing, we tried singular value decomposition, autoencoders, and nothing really did give something that had sense. So really, since we were in a proof of concept thing, we used a more manageable data set, which was the two-dimensional one from the RAMP challenge. Here you have the article, the link to the original paper, the library, and I ported it in Python 3, and you generate yourself events. It goes quite fast. In the example I will show today, I generated 60,000 of them. And the dataset looks like this. It's really a two-dimensional tracker. You have one layer of pixels. The more outer you go, the more pixels you have per layer. And you have a total of more or less 500,000 pixels. And in each event, you have between, let's say, 3 and 20 tracks that are recorded along 9 layers. Okay, let's start with in a proof of concept with a single track. So we just remove all of the tracks. We keep one. We'll have two steps. One is to find some nice and smart way to binarize our data. And then in the second part, having our random features, we'll try to go back to the angle and the inverse momentum of this track. How did we go for the binary encoding? Well, the DMD is a little bit more than 1 million pixels, and the number of pixels in the RAMP challenge are more than 500,000. So the straightforward idea was to map each of those pixels to one here. So the inner layer, the blue one, was mapped here in blue, orange, green, red. You get the idea. Now, if we have a track with 9 points, they will correspond to 9 points here, one per each layer. Now, the problem is that the OPU works best if you have more or less 50% of the hits hit. So we have to find a way to light more hits. And what we came with was that each time we encounter a hit, we switch from true to false and reversely, so that in the end, we have more or less 50% of the hits. Okay, we have our discretization, we pass it through the OPU, and we start the machine learning problem. And as I said, we use some ridge regression on the ground truth angle first. And what you have if you do this with 5,000 random features is this prediction versus true value, and you see that it works. It makes sense. We can predict on the test data set the phi angle as a function of well, we can predict the phi angle with an uncertainty of 0.25 radians. It's not perfect, it's not optimal. There are better means to achieve this, but it works. Same goes for the inverse momentum. So same thing, we take the same 5,000 variables. Now we change the y to the inverse momentum, and you can see that we can predict more or less the value. There are a lot of points in the middle which is not clear, and the interquartile range is not that bad. In the end, we can predict it with an uncertainty of 2.5 10 to the minus 4 inverse GeV. So it seems to work. It's great. It's interesting. Can we go to the full event? So we take all of the tracks of an event. Once again, we find a way to binarize the data, and then we try to predict, I don't know, the number of particles, their angles, the momenta. Okay, so the discretization part in this case is a little bit well complicated. What we used was something called reservoir computing, with the idea that as we go to the next layer, we keep some memory of what happened in the previous layer. If you start with the first layer, you allocate half of the DMD to the position of the points in the first layer, and for the first layer, half of it to some random pattern, which is 50% on. You pass it through the DMD, and you have your random variables. Second layer, you allocate half of it to the position of the points in the layer, and the second half of it is the binarization of what you got from your random variables, which means you get a memory of your first layer, and you iterate this each time, half of the layer dedicated to the current points, half of it to the memory of what happened, and you hope to keep a memory of everything that happened before and do computing on this. So that's for the binarization. There were some results. We don't have much time, so I just show one of them, which is we try to predict from the position of the points in the penultimate layer, the position of the point on the last layer. So for instance, if you have 16 hits in both layers, this is a plot of what it predicts as a function of the true value. And the big complicated plot on the upper right is here a sample of events. For each subplot on the left, you have the original angle, the position that's on the layer 9, and on the right, the position predicted by this OPU. And you can see that it kind of makes sense. The obvious question is, does it make more sense than a baseline algorithm, which would be, okay, we start from the position on layer 8, we just take them, we just assume them to be the same on layer 9, and that's a simple prediction you can have. And if you do this, you have here this curve in orange, and you see that, well, actually just this random baseline fares far better than what you got predicted from the OPU. So clearly that's not optimal. And for the first part, for tracking, my conclusion would be this. The OPU is a physical device that's suited to something particular, to reducing a dimensionality and training time on some problems. Half of the difficulty is to cast the problem. And for tracking, casting a problem for the OPU is quite hard. We did it, and we could make some estimations of particle parameters for a single track, and even estimations of number of particles, position predicted on next layer for more tracks, which made sense. It makes sense, but it really doesn't match traditional methods, even for simple baseline algorithms. So the question we ask is, probably it's more suited to calorimetry, and we did more studies in calorimetry. I will present two of them. The two were designed to be some end-to-end learning, so really not go through uncrafted variables, but start from images. make some CNN that were both optimized on huge superclusters and have a result. And we tried to just use the UPU to have some fast training, low dimensionality, and see how it fares in comparison. First study was this one, and it consisted in a calorimetric representation of detector, so 64 times 64 bins. We had a signal that was SUSY. The normalized distribution looked like this, the bottom right plot, versus a background which was QCD, where the distribution is shown on the bottom left plot here. And as I said in the article, and as for us, they really use raw features, so they use CNN, and we'll try to use OPU to achieve the best possible signal background separation. The usual step that we use is a discretization. What we did was to map each of the pixels from the calorimeter to 3 bits on the OPU. If there was no signal, of course, it was 0, 0, 0. And then we look at the energy distribution. And if we're in the low quantile, we'll just put 1 pixel on, so 0, 0, 1 the signal. In the middle, 0, 1, 1. And if we have a high energy, it will be 1, 1, 1. So that if you have a higher energy, more pixels on the OPU are lit. And then in the end, we make some linear regression. It was, in this case, with a single output neural network. Okay, how does it compare with the results from this study? So on the left, you have the results from the original paper. In blue, it's physics selection. So it's really simple cuts on the event. Above, you have some classical handcraft features methods, multi-layer perceptron and boosted decision trees, and above the results with CNN from the article. On the right, we have what we got. We don't aim, once again, that's really the message to fight with the best results, but to see if really fast and with low number of samples, we can achieve some results. So in this case, was the BDT and raw pixel, it was not good. The pure OPU was not good either. It was well below the physics selection. We made a small BDT on classical jet variables. It's better than physics selection. It kind of reproduce what we had on the left plot. But now that's an interesting point. If in addition to handcrafted variables, we feed the random features from the OPU to this BDT, we achieve a huge gain. Well, we achieve a sensible gain in performance. And that's the interesting point, is that by hiding those random features, which are quite orthogonal with the ones that physicists usually think about, we have at a cheap price a gain in performance. And what's interesting is that already with 5,000, 10,000 images, you can achieve an area under the curve, which is of 92%. So the whole message of this is that, well, the results for the calorimetry are better than what we had for the tracking. Probably the OPU is more suited to this kind of problems. Of course, it's not on par with CNN that were trained on 400,000 samples on huge superclusters, multi-optimized, but those require a large amount of training data, and us already with 5,000, 10,000 images, we can achieve some competitive results with physics selection, especially if it's boosted, if those variables are then fed into a more classical boosted decision tree algorithm. And finally, the last study, we tried to do something similar on a dataset which was more complicated and which was more finely grained. Here, the signal are W or TT bar, and the background is QCD. And for each simulated event, there are 800 candidates which are associated either to charged particles, photons, and hadrons. And then they are put into the corresponding histograms. And so for each of the particle type, you have 5 subdetectors. So here for photons, charge track in the middle, and right and the neutral hadrons. And well, it's already been histogram, and we try to once again represent it in a nice way in the OPU. So the discretization step goes like this, as was done in the previous study. We check the energy distribution in one of the subdetectors. In this case, that would be equal gamma forward. It's divided into 6 energy bins, and each of the energy bins will, for instance, if you take one event in the bin of higher energy, we'll duplicate it 6 times. And the duplication will be as a measure of the energy it was. So if the energy was higher, there will be more pixels that are put to on. Please remember that we don't mind if the pixels are close or far, because in the end it will be mixed all the same in the OPU. Okay, we don't have a lot of pixels that are put to on, so the idea as to have 25 pixels in UPUs that are hit is to apply a filter that will spread the heat that you have, and so that in each quantile bin we have 25% of the pixels hit. That's for one of the 11 subdetectors. We do this for all. So here you have, for instance, for EB, there were bigger arrays. So we just take 3 quantile bins in energy, EBs, gamma, HN, and so on, all of the subdetectors. That's what you put in the OPU. We process it once again. And then we apply linear machine learning methods. Below, you have the results achieved by the articles. So for TT bar, they have an area under the curve of, for simpler methods, 90%. For W, it's more 80%. And the results we achieve with ridge regression are 60% for W, 65% for TT bar. I also did some fast study with stochastic gradient descent for TT bar, which is the best result. I obtained 71%. It was more or less, it was something like 60% for W. Sorry, I didn't put it in the plot. But so it's not competitive once again with the best results, but it makes sense. It's not really stupid, and once again, it's really fast. So as a summary, we have this device, optical processing unit, that provides a way to reduce classification dimensionality and the training time. And to do this, it computes random matrices in a physical way. Now, can we cast it for physical problems? Where for tracking, as we saw, it's hard. We can estimate various parameters and really toy models of one track in a simplified detector. For more complicated problems, it makes sense without really matching traditional methods. For calorimetry, the results are better. We saw, for instance, that we had a faster training than CNNs, and even with a low number of samples, we achieved some results, which are, by the way, more robust. In another study, well, it's more or less the same message. It's not as good as a dedicated classifier, but the discrimination is decent. There are a lot of possibilities. I mean, it's really a work in progress. There are a lot of ways to cast image with the OPU, to then analyze the results, to try several algorithms that have to be tried out. So it's some kind of arborescent thing. The conclusion, the main message is this. Probably the OPU for HTTP problems has niche application. Maybe it's good for triggers, maybe it's too frequent tries of algorithm on a few events. But casting it for real HTTP problems, if it's possible, it still remains an open question. Okay, thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Laurent. Questions? Anyone? I have a very simple one. Maybe you mentioned it, but I forgot. I mean, how expensive is such a system?
Well, the thing is that the company that makes it, LightOn, provides it for free because they want more and more people to use it. So you have some, it works through notebooks. You put the data you want to analyze on their server, and you just can use for free for now the device. And well, it's so building it for specific purposes. I'm sorry, I don't have the number under the. And well, probably it would be suited to dedicated application, so it would really depend on the problem. They are currently upgrading their technology to use more pixels and faster devices. So, but the first one they made was really tabletop experiment, a proof of concept that works, and it's not that expensive, I would say. But yes, sorry, I don't have.
Okay, no problem. Thanks.
David put a comment into the chat about the price.
Yeah. Okay. Oops.
Wait.
Yes, he says it's about 10K euro per unit. More questions? We still have a few minutes time. I don't see anyone raising their hand. So, okay, then thank you again, Laurent, for this talk.
Thanks.
And we go on with Cenk about quantum